Hello, everyone. My name is Eglė Rindzevičiūtė, and I am Associate Professor at Kingston University, London. And I have the honor to chair this book launch today, a book launch and book discussion, which is hosted by Horus, the Colloquium for the History of Russian and Soviet Science, in partnership with the History of Science in Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe. So it is one of the first collaborations of this kind. As part of Horus tradition, we usually ask if there are any new people who haven't participated in a symposium before to raise their hands and introduce yourselves, perhaps by saying a few words about your research interests. I can't really see the names of the participants. Is there anyone who would like to, who's for the first time and would like to introduce themselves?
Hello, my name is Maria Vinogradova. I don't know why I appear as Jan Surman, one of the many. I am a historian of Soviet film, in particular what is often called useful cinema, as well as amateur films. And I'm very interested in the history of science. And this seminar was brought to my awareness by Slava Gerovich. So this is my first time.
Very welcome.
Yeah,
I see also Galina.
That Maria will be giving a talk in the Chorus series in 2 weeks on March 27th, and everybody's welcome.
That's great. We also have Galina Krivoshina, but Galina, could you please unmute yourself?
Okay. So for 40 years, I've been working in the Institute for the History of Science and Technology. But now I had to retire because in 2022 I left Russia, and now I'm living in Israel. But I'm still working. Still, I have contacts with the institute. So my focus of my interests is the history of 19th century Russian science and the beginning of the 20th, especially the history of scientific societies.
Mm-hmm. Great, very welcome, Galina. I see Jan Surman has a hand raised. So is this somebody who is not Jan Surman?
I am not Jan Surman.
No.
Apologies for that. I don't know why I'm listed as Jan Surman. My name is Genevieve Daly-Watkins. I'm a PhD student at Harvard University. I trace the intersection of medical and environmental history, and I'm curious as to how certain energy choices were made during the 20th century and the ways in which they affected public health in Central Asia.
Great, welcome. I saw one more hand. Was it
another Jan Surman? And actually,
right, please go ahead.
My name is Masha Vorontsova. I'm a retired biologist and conservationist, and first part of my career was in academic science, marine biology, and then later years and years in conservation, working in the NGO sector. So here I am just like a person who is generally interested in culture and science, and I'm very much interested to hear the presentation of Olga and learn more about her book. Thank you.
Thank you, welcome. I see Maria Silina has the hand up as well.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Jan. You can actually rename yourself and be yourself, I mean, for Zoom. Yeah, so I'm an art historian and a scholar in museum studies in the Soviet Union. I work on different topics from provenance research in the Soviet Union to the production of knowledge in Marxism. And I'm particularly interested in this book because I'm interested also in production of knowledge through exhibitions. And I work a lot with Academy of Artistic Sciences in Moscow. That was part of the organizing committee of the exhibition. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the event.
Very welcome, Maria. Okay, if there are no other hands up, I will continue introducing the speakers just briefly. And we're really very lucky to have Olga Elina with us. Olga is a doctor of historical sciences and also is a candidate of biological sciences. She is chief researcher of the Department of Historiography and source study of the history of science and technology at the Russian Academy of Science. And Olga has recently co-edited a book, which is called The Art and Science of Making the New Man in early 20th century Russia. This book was co-edited with Krementsov and Howell. And also she co-edited another book together with De Jong, Lambert, and Krementsov, and that book is called The Lysenko Controversy as a Global Phenomenon. And today Olga is presenting her most recent book, which was published in 2024, and the title of which you see on your screens. In addition to Olga's talk, her brief introduction of the book that you will be pleased to hear contains a lot of exciting images. We have two prominent researchers, historians of Soviet science, who are going to present comments and reflections. So the first speaker will be Douglas Weiner, who is a professor emeritus in the Department of History at the University of Arizona. And Weiner specializes in Russian and Soviet environmental history. Weiner has published too much to list his full work right here and right now, but I would like to mention his book, Models of Nature, Ecology, Conservation, and Cultural Revolution in Soviet Russia, which came out in 1988, and particularly his book called A Little Corner of Freedom, Russian Nature Protection from Stalin to Gorbachev, which was published in 1999 and has been tremendously influential in the field. The second speaker is Professor Nikolai Krementsov, who is based at the Universities of Toronto's Institute for the History and Philosophy of Science and Technology. And like Weiner, Krementsov has published too much to list right now. His work spans the history of science, medicine, and technology with a particular focus on Russia. Among his notable works are Stalinist Science. I have to say that was one of the first histories of Soviet science and technology that I've read as I think I was first-year PhD student in Stockholm at that time. So this book was published in 1997. And also I could particularly recommend his more recent book on very interesting history of eugenics in the Russian Empire and the early Soviet Union, which is called With and Without Galton, Vasily Florinsky and the Fate of Eugenics in Russia. So the first talk is about 20 minutes and the comments will be about 15 minutes, after which we'll have a little bit of time for Olga to respond to the commentators, and then hopefully we'll have plenty of time left for Q&A. If people can rename themselves, would be really, really helpful, because in order to ask questions, I would like to ask you to put a question mark in the chat. And if you can't rename yourself as Jan Sturman, please put the question mark and your name in the chat so I know who is asking the question. But now I will stop here and I will give the floor to Olga. Olga, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, dear friends, first I wanted to thank Jan, Eglė, Slava for inviting me to discuss my book at today's joint session. And of course, I appreciate Nikolai and Doug for their willingness to share their comments of my work. You see the name of the book. When I first initiated this project, I expected to be researching just a local agricultural event. But I quickly realized that the exhibition covered a much broader and more sophisticated view. This led to several questions, the answers to which shaped the core idea and narrative for the book. What was the exhibition about? What were its goals? What motivated its organizers? And finally, what does it reveal about science and technology in the early Soviet period? Here we can see key figures behind the exhibition, its patrons, almost all state and party structures, managers, art creative minds, and of course experts, including leading agricultural scientists and engineers. At a number of academic and government meetings, they debated what and how to exhibit. A major point was the future of agriculture. Simplifying, the debate centered on two opposing views: preserving individual peasant farming or collectivization. The first approach prevailed, and its advocates, economist Alexander Chayanov and his cousin, agronomist Sakrat Chayanov, you can see him on the picture, became leading managers of the exhibition. The book is based on numerous visual documents, and today, instead of following the book structure, I decided to take you on a virtual tour, doing my best to illustrate ideas and locations in science and technology. To visit the exhibition, one had to go to the future famous Gorky Park. At that time, the area was a wasteland and dump, but the state commission, led by People's Commissar of Education, Anatoly Lunacharsky, and Marshal Semyon Budyonny, probably for security reasons, selected it for the exhibition and a future public park. This was in line with the Soviet capital reconstruction project, promising a garden city in Moscow. The general design was commissioned to Ivan Zheltovsky, and Alexei Shizhev served as chief architect. Here are two stunning panoramic views facing the Kremlin, and you can see the Cathedral of Christ the Savior still standing, and looking towards Vorobyovo Hills and Neskuchny Garden. And our route is marked red on the exhibition general plan. Initially, intending to celebrate 5 years of the revolution, the organizers had to postpone the exhibition due to famine of 1921-22. And finally, the exhibition reflected the new economic policy with its element of market trade, private enterprise, and long-term land lease for peasantry. The declared aim was to demonstrate the scientific and technological advancements and modernization plans of Soviet Russia in agriculture and industry. Visitors entered through the triumphal arch designed by Zheltovsky, painted in red, white, and gray, the exhibition's main colors, followed with a large square for celebrations. And now we join one celebration, the opening one, which took place on August 19, with speeches by top state officials like Kalinin, Rykov, Lunacharsky, Krasin, and others. Vladimir Lenin, a key inspiration for the exhibition, was too ill to attend, but he was honored as a chairman with banners carrying his greeting in several languages. It's the central photo. A major absence was Lev Trotsky, People's Commissar for Military, who was expected to speak about Smychka, the bond, the connection between urban and rural industry and agriculture. A daily newspaper with the same name, Smychka, was published in over 80,000 copies. Meanwhile, other officials, including Rykov, he is on the Tribune, and Swiderski addressed this mixture between science and practice. Our second step is the main pavilion or the main house, comprised of a huge auditorium, a number of lecture rooms, and numerous scientific departments, which presented wide expositions of countries, natural environment, and resources using maps, charts, models, pictures. The key sections were nature in the USSR, covering climate, seas, soils, plants, and animals, and population of the USSR. The organizers promoted applied science with bold slogans like "For Bolshevik willpower, we will defeat drought. To produce more, one need to know more." These posters, along with many others released for the exhibition, were created with the approval of the Special Agitation Propaganda Department. Professor Alexei Dyrenko, for instance, contributed a lot to posters' content, emphasizing the role of state patronage in agricultural science. The central portrait of the exhibition showcased scientific agricultural displays instead of traditional flower beds and fountains. At its corner stood, stood a massive wind engine meant to symbolize engineering progress, but it did not work. A number of experimental plots and live plantains were set up, curated by top agronomists and botanists. Nikolai Vavilov himself and his team, for example, presented extensive exhibits of wheat and other cereals, which he collected for many years. And he himself often guided tour explaining his research on hereditary variability and other projects. Reflecting on the exhibition, he stated it was extremely valuable. His team could examine and collect seeds from all around the country. And he concluded that the exhibition was expensive and rushed, but for them it was incredibly useful. Another feature, as you can see, is a giant pyramid of fresh flowers with Lenin's portrait on it. Flowers were constantly replaced through the event, and on the other side there was a quote from Lenin which declared the bond with peasants. The communists promised them real help and support, as Lenin stated. One of the impressive structures of the exhibition was Машиностроение pavilion, or machinery and tools, also designed by Zheltovsky. In its floor plan, it resembled a giant gear, symbolizing industrial progress. Built from concrete, a new material for Russia, the pavilion still stands today. Avant-garde artist Alexandra Ekster decorated it with dynamic imagery of agricultural machinery. Here is one of her sketches. Inside, the visitors saw a diverse collection of modern machineries, from plows to seeders and water pumps. For example, the Selmash Syndicate, one of the biggest at that time, showcased latest advances, including a new Zaporozhets tractor. A tractor became a highlight of the machinery, but not just any tractor, and not just Zaporozhets, but American Ford Zone. One of the most famous moments was the Ford Zone's rally of more than 1,000 kilometers, I suppose, from Rostov-on-Don to Moscow, culminating in its victorious arrival at the exhibition. Tractor plowing competitions took place in fields of Timirazov Academy, and after the exhibition, the tractor driver became a prestigious profession. The Fordson even became a symbol of the exhibition, appearing in propaganda posters, performances, and stamps. By 1924, the Soviet Union began mass producing the Fordson Putilovets tractor in Leningrad. Another major attraction was aviation. A large balloon hovered over the exhibition, and the newly organized Association of Airline Connection, known as Dobrolyub, also made a splash by exhibiting a Junkers J-13 airplane, which offers sightseeing flights. Next stop is Земледелие Group, which included several pavilions with dozens of departments, vegetation house, vegetable and garden planters, such as a display of local flora by the Sukhumi Botanical Garden. On the central photo, you can see one of the most impressive sites of this section, a massive cart of a massive map of Russia made entirely of cereals, which gave a striking perspective on the country's agricultural richness. A large exhibit of the same group showcased agricultural technologies, focusing on the mass production of hybrid seeds. This project was initiated before World War I by Piotr Lisitsyn and was finalized with the Soviet Gosyam Kultura, a complex of elite selection at plant breeding stations, peasant cooperative seeder production, and factory sorting of seeds. The Department of Land Improvement presented swamp amelioration illustrated by a model of peatland site and a working experimental area. Another major project focused on the irrigation, in this case, the irrigation of Golodnaya hunger steppe in Turkestan. On the next slide, you can see agricultural technologies which were introduced to peasantry. The Plant Protection Department, in collaboration with several experts, presented numerous educational posters to illustrate crop protection techniques, such as aerial pest control using aviation. Now we move towards the riverfront to the pavilions of processing department. Of course, the most renowned pavilion was Mahorka by Konstantin Melnikov. It was revolutionary not only in constructivist design, but also in concept. And the production process was ingeniously reversed, beginning at the top of the pavilion and descending to the bottom. Mahorka still remains internationally recognized symbol of the Russian avant-garde and an icon of the exhibition itself. The nearby Republics Department was a late addition introduced after the USSR was officially formed in the very end of 1922. Despite time constraints, this section also included architectural masterpieces like the Turkestan Pavilion, set up by renowned Art Nouveau architect Fyodor Shevpel, with extensive exhibit of cotton cultivation. Another highlight was Golosev's eclectic Far East Pavilion, which combined symbolism and function. It showcased the collection of local crafts and resources, featuring a red flag with white sails, a representation of the Soviet Union's expansion and industrial ambitions at the Far Eastern frontier. Now we reach the village department, located near the exhibition's entrance. So many visitors, primarily peasant excursions, would explore this section first and foremost. The department was divided into two contrasting areas, the old village and the new village, or the village of the future. The old village was a living ethnographic display featuring traditional crafts and authentic peasant homesteads, which were measured and recreated in line with their original models. The most remarkably, these dwellings were inhabited. Families of so-called peasant inhabitants lived in their remodeled homes during the exhibition. While of no doubt objectifying, this bold experiment also provided these peasants with free access to the latest agricultural advancements, and their land and food taxes were significantly reduced for a period, which was crucially important. In contrast, the new village demonstrated an idealized vision of rural life. It included modernized and electrified houses, a community clubhouse, a library, children's nursery, agronomic center for consulting, etc. The organizers described the new village as a model for a future lifestyle and stated that the new village is not a fantasy. It's already possible in Russia today, if the peasant embraced it. More than 500,000 peasants, mostly with organized regional excursions, visited the exhibition. To encourage the adoption of new ideas, they were invited to study at the school of the exhibition, or school of the new peasantry, where professors from Timiryazov Academy and other institutions gave lectures, simplified readings, practical sessions, incorporation, machinery, modern technologies, and other issues of agronomy. And you can see example of the lecture schedule. Now we cross the Krymsky Wall Street using a special viaduct. The second major area of the exhibition was entirely devoted to foreign section. It included main...
Excuse me, Olga, you have just a couple of minutes left.
Yes,
So I can
thank you.
yeah.
It's fine. Main pavilion with scientific and engineering exhibits and numerous pavilions of 30 countries and around 600 private companies. You can see some of them on the photo. Contemporary accounts describe this section as the most vibrant and dynamic part of the exhibition because of Vladimir Shukov's design and Alexandra Ekster's creative visual decorations. The Bolshevik presented the exhibition as a diplomatic mission, urging foreign exhibitors to invest in the country of the future. They propagated the audience with the posters proclaiming, if you want to be known in every city of Russia, the White House in Washington, the city of London, etc. The way is to be at the All Union exhibition. Famous scholars also contributed to this diplomacy, publishing articles on cooperation with foreign capital. One of the key figures here was Fridtjof Nansen, head of the Nansen mission of famine relief, who played a crucial role in advocating the exhibition's humanitarian and cultural impact. And following the exhibition, the USSR established diplomatic relations with Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and France. It's only in 1924. Was it the influence of the exhibition? Quite possible. And my concluding remarks. I would like to summarize and share with you my vision on the exhibition as a scientific technological presentation, highlighting key trends in early Soviet science. The exhibition, first of all, reflected the Bolsheviks' commitment to scientific and technological modernization. It placed machinery at the center, signaling the future industrialization. Its reliance on foreign machinery mirrored the Soviet push for rapid technological advancement. Many innovations presented were revolutionary, reflecting continuity rather than a break with the past. It marked a remarkable level of institutionalization in science, pioneered mass scientific education for the peasantry, showcased Soviet Union's ambition to integrate into global networks despite political isolation, served as an effective propaganda tool for both domestic and international audiences, and demonstrated a productive collaboration between science and art, and served a model for future exhibitions. The great break in collectivization brought an end to the ideology and practices centered on individual peasant farming and cooperation, which the exhibition both propagated and reflected. However, many aspects of early Soviet science highlighted in the exhibition, from the primacy of practice to an emphasis on technology, became deeply embedded in the programs of large-scale Soviet science for years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Olga. That was fascinating. Without further ado, let us move to the second speaker, which is Douglas Weiner. Doug, please, the floor is yours. And Olga, if you could stop sharing your slides so that Douglas can try to share his.
Let's try it. Here we are. Can everyone see this?
Yes, yes. If you just make them full screen.
I don't know how I'm going to advance it.
If you go down, there is this tiny icon at the very bottom. Not this one.
It's like screen.
Little bit more left.
Just start slideshow, maybe.
Yeah, on the right. On the right. Yeah, this one.
This one.
Yeah, if you try to click on it.
Okay. There we go. Great. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Well, first of all, let me just congratulate Olga on an absolutely gorgeous, lovely, and fascinating book. And my first impression was that this is just a feast that you've brought to us. It's wonderfully written, researched. The book design is beautiful, not just the photographs, but the way that the chapters are, the chapter breaks are designed. There's serious analysis, and it certainly will stand as the definitive account. Okay, so as you noted in your talk as well, the key question in the early 1920s was the evolution of the peasantry and the direction of that evolution. And would it be a continuation of previous Slavophile, commune-oriented development of the peasantry, or would it be a Westernizer development based on the Stolypin farmers, the individual farmers? And we see through your book how much Narkom Ziem, under its deputy commissar Alexei Svidersky, was pushing the development of these forward-looking Stolypin-type farmers, the Yedinolichniki. However, and this, I think, one of the things that I would have liked to have seen in the book that but of course, you've already written 540 pages of text. So I'll just add to this, would have been a larger political context, because it's not as though every single Soviet politician was lined up behind this agenda. There were serious conflicts within the leadership of the party over not just peasant development, but overall whether industrialization should take a priority over developing the countryside. So there were two debates going on. One is agriculture, emphasis on what should be the priority, industry versus agriculture. The other debate was within agriculture, communes or the Stolypin-style peasants. And here we have a bunch of politicians that are not always in line with the program of the 1923 exhibition. So although Lev Trotsky helped Lenin in getting through NEP in 1921, by the time he was moving into opposition in 1923, he was already allied with people that were and espousing the idea of an industrial prioritization over a peasant-oriented policy. He would even call for a one-time expropriation of the peasants to fund industry and a jumpstart of industrialization. That would be a little bit later, but Trotsky was already abandoning any kind of orientation toward the peasantry. And this is especially the position of Georgy Leonidovich Pyatakov, who was another prominent member of the Bolshevik leadership. He was the deputy head of SNK under Rykov, but was in charge of the Ukraine during the Civil War and war communism, where he became oriented toward what would later become Stalin's policies of squeezing peasants and squeezing workers at the same time for the most rapid possible pace of industrialization. So this all, and even Nikolai Bukharin, at the time that this VSSR was being organized in 1923, was supporting the economic policies of Pyatakov and Trotsky. So, I mean, he wasn't in Trotsky's camp, but he was supporting those same radical policies as a member of the left opposition. And only terms later, after the exhibition has closed and becomes the supporter of NEP that he did. And that leaves the question open. Where did, as Lenin was failing, and you have to remember, he originally supported the exhibition, but then he had a series of strokes. And in 1923, he was not politically active, and especially toward the latter part of the year. And so the question is, since it was such a huge expense, where did the political support at the highest level of leadership come from that could have allowed the exhibition to be finished and completed? And my guess is that Alexei Ivanovich Rykov was the person who was carrying this on his shoulders in the realm of high politics. He was a very advanced thinker about smart agriculture, and later got involved in agriculture in Rostov and making it ecologically smart. So I think it was Rykov who was the person who was able to carry the day in the face of people like Trotsky and Pyatakov, who would have been hostile to this idea, the whole premise of the fair. Of course, all these other ministers were supporting it. Lunacharsky, Svidersky, Krasin certainly was also a forward-looking member of leadership. So, so this was not a consensus of the whole Bolshevik Party. This was the liberal wing of the Bolshevik Party. So it's a gradualist, almost Stolypin-like idea that some of these people had. So then the question arises, where did the pavilion of proletarian agriculture, proletarskое земледелие, come from? Was it a concession to hardliners who sponsored it? Was it added to the original plan, and by whom? So these are just questions that I'm raising about some of the materials here. Not detractive questions, but just supplementary questions. Well, you've already shown that the science content of this exhibition was incredibly rich. Just one example of that you put in was Leonte Ramensky's talk on the laws of the biosynosis. This became a classic paper much later, but it was delivered there. And so very forward-looking scientists were taking part, the most forward-looking scientists were taking part in this exhibition. And you also brought out, very importantly, the central importance of experimental stations in a progressive agriculture that these people envisaged. These stations were the backbone, along with the zemstva, of the Stolypin peasants, and the exhibition sought to recreate this same pre-revolutionary set of conditions for progressive agriculture. One suggestion for a new study would be the Soviet anti-plague stations and other stations that were parallel with agricultural experimental stations that were also very important in developing zoology. As you said, the exhibition was a demonstration of, not of, and for internationalism with its representation of foreigners. And here I have to congratulate you for an amazing research coup, which was intuiting to go to the Jewish Museum of Tolerance, to find materials on the Palestine Pavilion. And you should read the book. Toward the end, there's a priceless memoir by future Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion about his impressions of the exhibition. There were a lot of social commentary and content-related commentary by Ben-Gurion about what he saw as an exhibitor there. And he also showed, one of his observations was that peasants themselves were very interested in high yield. Many peasants were interested in improving their agriculture as they looked at improved crop varieties shown in the Palestine exhibit. And so I question whether this was really a progenitor of Stalinist industrialization. Certainly technology was featured, but the technology that was featured was largely directed at agricultural growth through individual farms and foreign trade, and not Stalin's path, which was autarkic and violent. So this was precisely a different kind of industrialization, I think, that you've shown. So your study raises the biggest questions again. I'm conclude really quickly. Was all of this possible? Was a gradualist attempt at growth possible? That's the question Steve Cohen raised in his famous biography of Bukharin. Could this have been extended over time, spread, and as peasants got more prosperous, they would, of course, create a real market in Russia, which Russia had lacked to a great extent. And the biggest question, of course, that Theodor von Lauer raised, is Western-style liberalism at all feasible in Russia, given the burdens of Russian history? Finally, I just wanted to put up some stamps of the 1954 VDNKh, which was also called, if you look on top, VSKV, the All-Union Agricultural Exhibition. And you could see the design of the Republican buildings was very much in the mold of the designs that these designers came up with in 1924. So if you could comment on that, that would be interesting. It seems like maybe somebody had remembered that exhibition, and how did they approach the Soviet leadership in 1953 to put this on, and what was its meaning? So that would be an interesting comparison, it seems. A couple of tiny critiques, and then I'm finished. Some chapters, will, like literature, I thought were a little bit weak. They were just put in to show that there was literature that was associated with it, but it didn't really wasn't part of the general big points that you were making. And finally, one little footnote. When you were talking about Nauka's presence in 1923 at the exhibition, you cited a recent article in Vestnik RGGU by Yelena Alexandra Skripka. Skripka's article is not the place to look for this information. And my book already spoke about Nauka at the exhibition, Models of Nature. And Felix Schielmark's book is, of course, a great primary source for learning about the ins and outs of the fight between Nakamziem and Nakampros. So I thought lead readers always not to the derivative article, but to the original sources. But overall, that's a tiny point. I am so impressed with your book, and I'm going to hand it over to Nikolai.
Thank you so much, Doug, and thank you for sticking to time so perfectly. Nikolai, please, would you like to try to share your slides?
Right. Well, I'd like to begin by congratulating Olga with another brilliant book and thanking the organizers for inviting me to share with you some of my impressions of reading it. The book is exemplary in many ways, from the wealth and breadth of its sources to a synthetic analytical framework, which brings together insights from numerous historical disciplines. And in my opinion, it should be obligatory reading for not only historians of Russian science and technology, but for historians of Russia, generally speaking. So I'll urge you all of you to read it and read it carefully. In listening to Doug's comments, I was reminded of Bulata Kudjava's poetical rethinking of his own writing a historical novel. He famously insisted that everyone writes as one's hears. Каждый пишет, как он дышит. I would suggest that everybody reads as one sees. Каждый читает так, как он видит. And the reader's gaze always guided by personal experiences, knowledge, and interests. So in my comments, I would like not to kind of rehearse the great variety of images, ideas, and questions and themes presented in the book, but share with you some of my scattered thoughts on a big picture, which emerged in my mind as a result of my, no doubt, astigmatic reading of the book. If I were asked to characterize the book's content in one word, I would use the word smычка, which is one of those wonderful verbal nouns, отглагольные существительные, in Russian language, which kind of brings out lots and lots of evocative connotations. We've heard already several of them. And the book deals with all kinds of smычка, of the past and the future, city and village, workers and peasants, industry and agriculture, Bolsheviks and scientists, arts and sciences, theories and practices, science and technology, whatnot. So indeed, in my view, the book itself is a kind of brilliant example of smычка. It presents a masterful intertwining of its textual and visual, pictorial and analytical elements. Nobody mentioned, so let me. The book title is borrowed from the title of a famous piano suite by Modest Mussorgsky, usually translated in English as Pictures at an Exhibition. As Mussorgsky's 10 pieces were kind of tied together, smычка again, by the run-through theme of composer's promenade from an exhibition by his friend, artist and architect Victor Hartmann, held at the St. Petersburg Academy of Arts. Incidentally, Hartmann became academician for his design of the 1870 All-Russian Manufacturing Exhibit. So there is another kind of smычка here. He was founder of the so-called Russian style in architecture presented in this sketch, which dominated practically all pre-revolutionary agricultural and industrial and manufacturing exhibits. So as Mussorgsky's music conveyed his impressions of Hartmann's exhibition, so Olga's book shares with us her thoughts of another exhibition. And like Mussorgsky's suite, the book takes us, as Olga just did in her presentation, on a promenade through this peculiar exhibition with Olga as our very knowledgeable and engaging guide. So a big picture which emerges in my mind out of this promenade is very large indeed. The book itself stretches over 8 chapters, 150 plus illustrations to more than 500 pages. But its length is not a sign of her author's indulgence in the minutiae of her subject. It is so large out of necessity to present and accommodate on its canvas literally hundreds of individual figures of people, things, ideas, places, processes, visions, and so on. The indexes of just persons and institutions mentioned in this book come up to 18 pages. So the crowds not only were passing through the exhibition, they were involved in its construction, inception, and operations. We meet countless persons, and Olga just showed us involved with the exhibition. Its organizers, builders, ideologues, supervisors, raconteurs, exhibitors, entertainers, visitors, journalists and scientists, troubadours, and even human exhibits. So among them, we meet state officials, scientists, agronomists, diplomats, peasants, students, poets, writers, each of them with their own ideas, interests, goals, values, and visions. And we observe them in interactions. We see their attitudes, conflicts, relations, discussions, negotiations, performances. And what brings this multitude of actors and actions into a coherent picture is not exhibition striking visuals or its numerous memorabilia, which, as Olga reminded us through book, has been discussed by numerous art historians. In her book, it is the exhibit's overarching theme. And I'm not sure I agree with Doug that the theme of this book is peasantry, because I think, as it states in the subtitle, the overarching theme is science and technologies, but on technologies a little later at the exhibition. And in Olga's book, science is for the first time comes into the focus of investigating this particular exhibition and becomes its central subject. As the book argues convincingly, the exhibition's major goal was to serve as a school for peasants. And the purpose of that school was to teach peasants science in order to build a socialist agriculture. Yes, there were different visions of what social agriculture should be, and they were brought together during the construction of the exhibition. One could say that what we see on that big picture is far from a chaos of, say, Picasso's Guernica or Brylov's Last Day of Pompeii. Just as iron filings arrange themselves into a recognizable picture along the lines of magnetic force field, so too in our big picture, we see the numerous individuals arranged in the force lines, along the force lines of tensions between two major groups involved with the exhibition. It's patrons and funders and whatnot, the Bolsheviks, and its masterminds, the scientists. And it is within that force field of tensions comes the most important question: what science is and what it is supposed to be in the country of the victorious proletarian revolution. And as a side effect, who and how is to advance it. To put it briefly, it is the contrast between two images of science and the scientists, the one held by scientists themselves and another held by their patrons, the Bolsheviks. All other groups could be arranged within this force field, moving to one pole or another. And whether we talk about artists, architects, or literati and journalists involved with the exhibition, all of them kind of spread along those lines. So in a way, I would argue that the exhibition served not only as school for peasants, it also served as a school for scientists and Bolsheviks to learn from each other and find that smyczka in their diverging images of what science is and what it's supposed to be. All of you are quite familiar, I hope, with those two diverging visions. I just go, very quickly through their major differences and emphasize just, how different they were. For scientists, their vocation is kind of an organized, universal, unencumbered, transnational pursuit of knowledge about the world we live in and about ourselves in that world. Its main goal is the production of true knowledge, which would benefit everyone. It provides foundation for practical technologies, but in itself, it's independent and separated from non-science by all kinds of boundaries, social, linguistic, etc. It is conducted in special spaces and institutions, laboratories, experimental stations, and whatnot. It is advanced by highly trained workforce, certified by a hierarchical system of degrees and titles, and its main values on the novelty and objectivity of produced knowledge, which is assessed by the scientific community itself through specially designed methods and tools. The image of the patrons of the exhibition is very, very different. For them, and their views deriving from their foundational doctrine, Marxism, there is no such thing as universal science in a class society. So science is instrument of organizing labor activities that serves the interests of a ruling class. And as such, and this is very important part, it is synonymous with technology, engineering, and management. It is pursued or conducted wherever labor activity occurred, in factories, fields, and so on. It is advanced not by some specialists, but by the masses. The proletariat and the peasants should be advancing science. And its greatest value is not the novelty and objectivity of knowledge, but its utility. And it assessed through labor practices. In the fall of 1918, the kind of...
Excuse me, Nikolai, if you could wrap it up in a minute or less, so then we could go to discussion. I know that you have prepared much more, but maybe we can come back to what you have to say later on.
Let me kind of say a few words about how these two images were reconciled at the exhibition.
Yes, in 2 minutes.
All right, I'll try.
Thank you.
I'll try. So at the exhibition, these two diverging images were brought together. They were merged, hybridized, reconciled. You pick your favorite verb, which will correspond to the smyčka. The resulting hybrid was quite peculiar. Let me give you just a few quotes you can read from both scientists and the main target of the exhibition, the peasants, and you will see how different they are. So, although, say, following the ideas of proletarian class science, the head of Narkomzum, Yakovenko, insisted that we must make science and technology serve our tasks. And this is a quote from the book. The book shows that agricultural scientists did not have to be pressed into the service. And this is a very important part again, because particularly in agriculture and partially in medicine, scientists long ago internalized this idea of science in the service of people, служение народу. They shared this belief in utility of their work for the people with other members of Russian intelligentsia for a long time. And what came out of this smyčka was very strange kind of image, of which I can emphasize only two parts. One, and most important, that the knowledge, which is the main part of this image for scientists, is reduced in this hybrid to a book. It becomes a theory that must be tested in and corrected by practice. And numerous posters, which we see in the book, illustrate it perfectly. The second is idea of science not only for the masses, but by the masses, which resulted in the call for a non-caste, vnikastove Nauka. And what is interesting about that is that the man who issued the call and built some institutional structures to support it was the editor-in-chief of the official guide to the exhibition, Alexander Modestov. I'll stop here and let discussion develop as it would.
Great. Thank you, Nikolai. Thank you to Olga and thank you to both speakers. That was really rich and lots of food for thought. I do have a few questions, but maybe there are some questions coming from the audience. Alexander Kleitman has introduced himself, but doesn't want to ask a question. Yes, Slava, please.
Yes, I think it's a great book and very, very stimulating comments from Doug and Elective and Nikolai. My question kind of relates to what both of them comment on the kind of tension between different groups that may have been reflected in the design and what happened at the exhibit. And my question concerns the kind of reaction to the exhibit. Was there any criticism, public or maybe private, of the exhibit inside the country or maybe by foreign visitors? And what does it tell us? So does that criticism reflect some of these tensions that Doug and Nikolai talked about? Olga, I think you're muted. Olga.
Can I answer right now, or are we gathering the questions? Eglė, what do you think?
Yeah, I suggest that we take one question at a time, so please go ahead.
Yes. It's a good question. Actually, there are so many reactions on what was going on the exhibition. One was the reaction of the scientific community, and partly I discussed it when I quote Vavilov's comments. The exhibition was very rushed, but rather useful. But this rush and of course a lot of money, numerous funding of the exhibition also contributed to criticism from the scientists who still wanted more, because many of the institutions, there were more than 20 institutions presented at the exhibition, wanted to exhibit their best things, their best parts of the projects, and they need a lot of space for this. And of course, there were huge restrictions both in money context and of the territory context. As people audience, as visitors, I think there are also two opposite views on the exhibition. Most of all, visitors who entered this absolutely amazing area, imagine this is a beginning of 1920s. The disaster all around the country and even in Moscow, and you are in the absolutely amazing space of celebration, of holiday, of net opportunities to have to get food, etc., etc. Or for instance to use airplane to go to air excursion, and of course there were a number of replies that the exhibition was absolutely amazing and one of the best that they could imagine. Foreign criticism, I'm not very much aware of this this part of criticism. Just
Нет, нет, завтра. Завтра, да.
excuse me?
Alexei, could you please mute yourself? Sounds like you have unmuted. Sorry, Olga, it's just that somebody have unmuted themselves, so it's a disruptive noise. Please go ahead.
But of course, official newspapers and magazines, which I could examine, were very positive about the exhibition, just because it gave an opportunity to visit Russia and to have a look what is going on in Russia. And of course, they were impressed. Probably it was a kind of, simulacrum, but not only simulacrum. As I was trying to demonstrate, there were real presentations of technique, technology, and scientific endeavors, etc. So the replies, the articles in foreign magazines, probably not in the newspapers. I didn't have time to have a look at all newspapers of that period. But the magazines, at least American, some of American and German, were very positive. But of course, there was a famous memoir of Okunev, as far as I remember, who visited the exhibition many times, and every time he was found something to criticize from high prices for some items to I don't remember what exactly. Probably the lack of color, because all the construction was from wood, and some of them lacked in colors, just because of the rush with the exhibition. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. I have Dmitry Blishko next.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. That's marvelous presentation, and I really love the conversation on that too. And that was told a lot about this division between scientists and their political patrons. And I'm just wondering, among all that people you're writing about, were there any figures that could challenge this dichotomy on patrons and scientists? In other words, were there any activists, like scientists, who will share the ethics of social and political life and of Bolsheviks and their perspective on research, aim, and role in social life? Who could be compared, for instance, to Nikolai Marr, who was doing some science and at the same time was buying these Bolshevik ethics. Thank you.
Could you please specify your question? Are you asking about the contradiction between scientists and authorities, or?
No, just an opposite. So Nikolai was stressing that was the difference in between scientific perspective on the role of science and Bolshevik perspective on the role of science. And I'm asking about figures who will combine them. Were there people who told, yes, now in the Bolshevik state, we really believe that the science should work in this way, that it should be like pragmatic, and that they're part of their productive force, and we share the same perspective on life, and let's do that together.
Got it. Actually, these questions probably is better to address to Nikolai, because from my perspective, there were no such a diversity between the approaches of scientists involved in the exhibitions and the officials who were supported these scientists totally, and sometimes even before the scientists decided to apply for instance, additional funding, which were absolutely impossible, and state leaders understood that it will end in nothing. there was an absolutely absolutely amazing and probably very, very short but very lucky period of coincidence, of absolute cooperation between science and not state, but patrons from the state authorities. All of them were united with the idea to represent what they thought would be perfect for Russia, what would serve for its future prosperity. They both this group were discussing on numerous meetings what to be done for modernizing Russia. And I don't think there are serious contradictions between these two groups involved in the exhibition setting up. But of course, Doug was absolutely right. If to put this exhibition, the discussions behind the exhibition into a more wide context, more wide frame of the future of agriculture discussions. Of course, there were oppositions to the prevailing idea of the exhibition, to make focus, to make accent at the so-called Середняк, or the peasant who decided not to break with his past, but to long for science and scientific technologies, to adopt them for future refined farming. I hope I answered your question, more or less.
Okay. Alexei.
All right, thank you. Do you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I just curious about the genre of such exhibitions. Do we know for the organizers of this one, what kind of models they had in mind? Do you know some kind of examples that they wanted to imitate or inspired? And also, what is the connection between this exhibition and later VDNKh in Moscow? Because VDNKh, if I remember correctly, initially was also thought to be a one-time thing. And then at some point, they decided to make it permanent. Whether there were any, I mean, ideas to make this kind of exhibition in the early one permanent or regular, periodic, or something like that?
It's a good question. Thank you. Actually, I was trying to find some models on which the organizers could base their ideas of the exhibition. And I must say it was absolutely new, not only in design, but in desire to put science, technique, technology, and education in the very center of the exhibition. When I started this project, I really thought it was just a regular, traditional agricultural shows, agricultural exhibitions. There were a list of them, and I don't think it for the first chapter, probably an introduction, I'm describing the gallery of such an exhibitions. Strange as it may sound, probably one of the model was the exhibition in Riga, which took place the same year in the spring. They were really trying to, for instance, to invite agricultural stations to exhibit at the exhibition. But of course, some elements of the exhibitions, like put in the core of exhibition, the work of scientific experiment stations were presented, for instance, in the United States at the exhibition of 1893. But not in the previous exhibitions which Russia organized. And your second part was about the future VDNKh exhibitions, right? If we have a look at the very beginning of the VDNKh, at the exhibition of 1935, which was organized, which included the same organizers, at least from the list of artists and architects, with Oldarszewski as a chief architect. Of course, they were very similar in the idea of what and how to exhibit, of how to combine art and scientific exhibits. Probably Jan would know more about this exhibition. He wrote an article about the Palace of Science, and I don't remember state policy as far as I remember the name of the palace was, but this project was failed. In a way, there was a connection in personalities, but not in, I can say that in ideology as well.
Thank you so much. We have Galina Krivoshina, who actually put a question earlier, but I missed it. Galina, please. Sorry about that.
First of all, I want to thank Olga and all the commentators. It was very interesting, really. And those speeches arose many good ideas, I think, at least in my head. But I have a question of more practical kind. Some years ago, when I was studying the history of the so-called Moscow scientific exhibitions of the second half of the 19th century, I saw that, the organizers of those exhibitions after the end of the exhibitions found themselves before a problem. What to do with all those constructions that were made for the exhibition, huge constructions, to use them for some useful purpose or, to get rid of them. So what happened with all those buildings that were constructed for this exhibition?
Thank you. It's a perfect question. Actually, Nikolai Krementsov, who was one of the reviewers of my book and made absolutely great contribution to its structure, because I had to write a little chapter of aftermath of the exhibition, exactly about what happened with the exhibits, with the exhibition structures, etc. There are many approaches to study this absolutely amazing theme, because I just give you a frame. First of all the exhibits, mostly all the exhibits, returned to their exhibitors, to the agricultural stations, to the institutions, etc., etc. But only in Ukraine, they formed absolutely new and independent museum of the history of agriculture. In Russia, in Moscow, the situation was following. I mentioned that all the buildings were made from wood, and the organizers understood that the life of these buildings anyway will be very short. They were trying to decide how to remodel this exhibition, to recreate some of the buildings. Just two of them were from concrete. Finally, they refused from this idea. The exhibition was used, as far as I remember, only twice or three times for car exhibition and for something like this. And finally, it was used for living place, for families, for some local enterprises, etc., etc. So the future of this area, of course, there was a plan to remodel all this area, and it was done in 1929 when this Gorky Park was finally organized on this place. So that's the end of the exhibition story.
Oh, yes, thank you. And that was my second question about museums, but you already answered it. Yes,
that's it. Some of the collections went to Polytechnical Museum, not from my point of view, not so impressive, but they still have some in their
yes,
department. Yeah.
By the way, that central figure, that windmill, yes?
It was a model 2 years in 2 years after the exhibition in the Institute of Aerodynamics, and there it finally worked.
And why did they put unworking thing in the center?
They were hoping it will work. it happened. It happened just at the last moment.
Ah, I see. So they hope that it will work.
Of course, it should be working.
Ah, I see. That's symbolic, I should say.
Absolutely.
Just another beautiful detail, really. So thank you so much, Olga. I have put myself on the list of questions. So I was just wondering, in your conclusions, one of the conclusions that you suggested was that there was a strong emphasis on continuity in the exhibition as a whole, and not so much a rupture with the past. And that made me wonder, so how did this exhibition compare with earlier agricultural exhibitions in the Russian Empire, if you looked at that? And you mentioned, of course, that part of that exhibition was Ukraine and also Central Asian countries. Was there any kind of pattern of imperial thinking in the way how those areas were integrated in the exhibition? And also the Baltic states, obviously at that time we were not part of the Soviet Union, but when thinking, for example, about forestry is such a long-term undertaking. And it was a huge thing in the Russian Empire, and obviously the Baltic forests were part of that long-term policy. So I'm just curious how this imperial thinking gets reproduced, or maybe modified, or maybe survives in some elements in that particular exhibition.
Thank you, Eglė. It's absolutely amazing question. Actually, I would say there were two different periods of the exhibition setting up. The first one was before the USSR was officially formed. And this period included separate groups of pavilions which belonged, for instance, to Ukraine, to Belarus, to some other guests, as they put it. After USSR was formed, there was a real rush to constrain a number of other pavilions, like Turkestan, etc., etc., etc. But still, there were two approaches in the policy, in the national policy in Soviet Russia at that time. And the first approach was connected with the independence, of course, not total independence, but independence in at least in scientific and technological policy of the regions and of the republics. And that's exactly what we can see in many pavilions, like pavilion of Ukraine, because there was a huge exposition of the national machinery and agriculture, of course. And Baltic countries were participants of the foreign department. And this was quite different. And the ideas of just integration of USSR into global networks. I could not say that there were an ideas of imperial thinking or something like this. Quite opposite. Russia, even in the form of the USSR, was trying to integrate as one other part in this global network.
So if I may follow up, it was as much externally oriented, directed as internally in a way.
Yes, that's it.
It's so interesting. I'll just very quick follow up. I see there is probably another question. I was also wondering how would that exhibition compare with, for example, similar exhibitions in other developing contexts, like, for example, India had a lot of agricultural shows since the 19th century, and there is, of course, this also very important imperial dimension there. So I just wonder if we all followed a pretty much set format set by the Great Exhibition in Paris, or was there some kind of internal logic developing as well?
I think that the crucial detail is that this exhibition was not agricultural. The title, agricultural and craft industrial, is from my point of view, could disorientate the audience. Actually, this exhibition was more about science, technique, technology, and education, but not agriculture itself. Russia, which we saw at the great exhibitions, Russia, which presented agricultural products, raw products from one side, and jewelers and stones and rural materials from the other side. It was not the same Russia which we saw at the 1923 exhibition.
Thank you very much. We still have time for one or two questions. Doug, please.
I just want just to this question, if you compare the Belgian World's Fair of 1910 with the 1923 agricultural exhibition, the Belgians had people living in huts from the Belgian Congo, and that was, of course, a demonstration of the imperial power of Belgium and its ability to show the people of Brussels that they're part of this empire, right? And of course, the didactic nature of peasants living in the old village in the 1923 exhibition was absolutely different. It was an instruction on what needs to be left behind, rather than a demonstration of imperial power and racism. So there's an interesting contrast there. So Belgians had people living in Congolese people. They were actually Congolese policemen that were brought up to play the part of Congolese peasants living in huts in the Brussels exhibition. Anyway, just a little footnote there.
Actually, there were not only Belgium exposition, but in many exhibitions there were so-called ethnographic expositions with dwellings, with living people who were exposed. But of course, there is, from my point of view, there is a striking difference between these two approaches. But still, an element of objectifying was of no doubt existed. And you had an opportunity to read in the book what happened, what exactly happened with these peasant inhabitants, how they suffered with this so-called summer weather, which turned out to be extremely cold, and how the organizers were trying to manage these problems. But they, I mean, these peasants, they did what they could, and they really used this experience to study the exhibition. This was absolutely amazing. And Nikolai was absolutely right, and you also mentioned these were the Stolypins peasants, probably sons and daughters, and probably some of them themselves who came to the exhibition, the new peasants, or even American peasants, how they were called in Soviet Russia. It's very strange, but it was like this.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and another interesting example, of course, how the modern strategies of displaying progress and displaying what the progress is contrasted with. And there is lots of interesting work in museum studies about, mainly based on the British museology and archaeology, and how that research was part of the imperial kind of positioning of progressive discourses, and what is liberal and modern and European and what is not, and using the format of exhibition and displaying the so-called primordial, so-called primitive cultures to contrast the Western industrial modernity. So it's really interesting. So when I was thinking about the imperial frameworks and the Soviet exhibition, I wasn't so much thinking about kind of geopolitics in itself, but rather imperial formats of reproducing power and knowledge, which was common not only to Russia, but of course to the European empires as well. Any other questions? Anyone? If not, I just would like maybe to invite commentators, maybe to ask you if you have anything to add, or maybe a final word before we... Oh no, now we have Ksenia. So first I invite Ksenia and then the commentators to say the last words. Ksenia, please.
Yes, I hope you can hear me fine. Yeah, so I was not on a very good connection. So yeah, so thank you so much for a very interesting project. I'm very happy that I haven't read the book, of course, but I'm very happy that I managed to zoom in and to learn about it. I was wondering, because I also have done some work on the much later exhibit of Soviet Siberia, which was traveling in the United States in the mid-1970s. And what was striking in my case were glaring absences. So I'm wondering whether in this exhibit that there are sort of any obvious things that you think should be there, but somehow didn't make it. And I'm just curious whether you had like these observations about things that you would expect to show up, given what we know about the Soviet history of the time, but they are not. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I could hardly hear you. Something is wrong with my connection. Could you please repeat your question?
Sure. So, like in my case on the Soviet Siberia, right, it's obvious that, for instance, something like BAM should be there, but it's not, for a series of reasons that I can demonstrate. So I'm wondering if in your exhibit, right, because there are so many items, but probably not everything that you would imagine. So if you found like any like glaring absences of very important developments of the time that were not showcased, and if you have explanations for that.
Thank you for your question. Yes, I think just one, but very crucial exhibit was absent. It was connected with this very commission of the support of famine in Russia, which I mentioned by Fridtjof Nansen, to the period of exhibition. This commission was absolutely replaced by another state commission. And this private initiative and the private activities of not only Fridtjof Nansen, but many other organizations like American foundations who made a lot for famine relief in Russia, were absent at the final version of exhibition, but in the archival documents, there are a lot of sketches of how and where to exhibit their activities, their results, etc., etc. And I must add that final exhibition and archival documents of the collections in many cases are quite give us quite different information. I mentioned one example, this Trotsky is present, his absence at the opening ceremony, but he actually visited the exhibition 3 times, and it was very interesting. What exactly did he do there? He met Vavilov, and Vavilov guided him a tour, and they talked, but there is no document about these days of Trotsky's present. Only documents about his proclaimed speech about Smychka, which we couldn't find in the newspapers, in the published sources, etc. So there is one of the examples, one example, and there are some others kind of connected with the same area of military, some posters which were prohibited by the agitation propaganda department, etc.
Okay, thank you so much, Olga. It's now 6 o'clock, so unfortunately we need to be ending now. So I just would like to invite Slava